It's time to preview the game. It's time to preview this game, and it's a lot of interesting stuff to bring up because it's two sides in terms of where the form lies. Villa are obviously on massive form away from home. Tottenham are on good form at home. Spurs have only lost one game at home, and that was the Arsenal game where I thought maybe it deserved the game, how it panned out, probably deserved honours even in terms of a draw. Aston Villa have won every game apart from one, which they drew away to Ipswich in a 2-2 game. So both these sides are definitely going to fancy their chances, aren't they?
Yeah, and I think obviously Spurs have been blowing teams away at home, albeit the teams, the one a really good team they faced, Arsenal, there was a 1-0 loss, but 4-0 against Everton, 3-1 against Brentford, 4-1 against West Ham. So really scoring a lot of goals, really taking it to the opposition every game. We've dominated, it's fair to say, every game at home for sure. And the Arsenal game, obviously, we conceded with a corner, and we couldn't really strike back. Villa, on the other hand, away from home, yes, they've won, but they haven't kept a clean sheet yet. They have won 3 and drawn 1, but I'm looking at some of their stats on their away form, and they've lost the XG battle in every game apart from the Leicester game. They've had less XG than opposition. They've conceded in every game.
How many clean sheets have we kept at home? Just one?
We've kept 1 clean sheet at home. Yeah, they haven't kept a clean sheet yet away from home.
So not much in it.
Ipswich, they drew 2-2 in a game where Ipswich really should have won. Fulham, they won 3-1, but that game very much flipped on a penalty, which Fulham missed, and then all of a sudden Villa went up the other end and scored, and then Fulham got a man sent off, so it changed very quickly, that game. Obviously then they beat Leicester away, which we failed to do, and they did win away at West Ham, albeit it was the opening game of the season, and that could have gone either way as well. So I do think, from what I've seen from Villa, the performances, I don't think they can continue to play the way they have away from home and continue to get these results, but they are clearly still a very solid team, and they're still, Unai Emery's done such a brilliant job there. They're such a hard, compact team, and you have to be really on your game to get through them. I do think Ipswich had a brilliant game against them, but they're a very aggressive team. They're a very strong team, but they do also give you chances. People talk about how we're open and stuff, but Villa have conceded 1 more goal than us this season, and I think defensively they play a very high line, very risky, but they don't. But the difference between them and us is they play a high line, but they do retreat into a low block a bit more, and they can be quite passive in their pressing. They don't press as aggressively as we do. They have a bit of an aggressive mid block, but sometimes they give you a bit of time on the ball, and they give you a bit of the ascendancy, especially away from home. They allow the opposition to have the ball, and I feel like doing that with a high line against us, where we got the likes of Son and Johnson with pace running in behind, could smell a bit of trouble. It's why I think we got a lot of joy out of them last year, which I think we created a lot of chances against them. You could argue whether they're a better side this year than they were last year, or we're a worse or better side than we were. But I think when it came to the matchups last season, they did give us a lot of time on the ball, and we were able to do a lot with it when they faced us. So whether they switch things up for this game, whether they learn some of the lessons from last year or not, we'll have to wait and see. But I think from what I've seen from them away from home this season, I mean, if they play like they have been, I think there will be a lot of chances there for us.
I think there'll be a lot of chances both ends. And like I said, I think both teams fancy their chances. I do feel like both teams, in terms of how they're playing the game, have improved from last season. Both teams kind of fell off, didn't they, towards the back end of last season. It was like a limp over the line to who to get that top four.
Consider how badly we collapsed right at the end of the season. We only finished a point behind them. So
yeah, because they also collapsed.
That's what I'm saying. But that doesn't get because they got into that top 4. That doesn't get highlighted a lot, and everyone says we bottled it and collapsed. And which look, I'm not saying we didn't. I'm just saying there was only 1 point in it. It's not like they finished 10 points clear of us. It was 1 point. And I think, the gap between the two teams last season, because they finished above us, people saying it's bigger than it was, I would say.
But the difference was they were playing in Europe. They were playing 2 games a week at that point, at that moment in time, and we won. And if you remember when we beat them 4-0, back at Villa Park. You know, they were completely out on their legs that day. They played 3 games in the space of a week. They had a big clash against Ajax in the midweek before we played them, and they played Luton a few days before that, and they pretty much played the same team in all 3 of those games. So it was more or less, maybe it was like 9 or 10 players playing those 3 games in a week, and we were coming into it very fresh, and we obviously battered them. So I do think that game wasn't really a true testament of both teams.
Potentially, I don't think you can give a Villa can have excuses like that, in my opinion, because that's what you have to deal with as a team. So I think if you can't handle it, that is your true testament as a team, in my opinion. They did rest more players probably than us in midweek.
They rested pretty much everyone.
So will they be? You know, they did play people like McGinn. They did play like I think Carlos potentially might play. Obviously, Duran is a player. He probably won't start against us, but he's obviously going to play a part. But they did rest a lot of players in midweek. Lowell Bailey started as well, I think, in midweek as well. He might start against us. So I think we obviously had a much bigger effort than they did, but they lost. And as much as they were well rested, you know, there is 2 games now. They drew with Bournemouth. They lost to Palace, and those things do make a difference. That atmosphere in the camp can change, even though it's a different team. I don't think it's like you can completely ignore it if you lose, because I do think sometimes those bad results can seep in to everyone. I think we've seen it with our team. Even when we've changed and we've had a bad result, it can change the dynamic a bit. I'm not saying it will, but I'm just saying it can't be completely dismissed. They did lose against Palace in midweek at home, which was quite poor result. So they'll be disappointed with that. Against Bournemouth last game, 1-0 up going to the last kick of the game, and they conceded and made it 1-1. I think they were quite unlucky because they probably deserved to win, but you know, they did concede that late goal, so that'll be very frustrating with that for them. Obviously, we went on and then lost to Palace, which is going to be very frustrating, but we did respond with a good win against City. So it's going to be very interesting, the dynamic, and going into this, who's going to have more confidence.
Yeah, I think... Yeah, I'm not sure who comes into it with more confidence, to be honest with you. It's going to be a really interesting tactical battle when you're looking at it. And
Did we show the form, or has it not come up yet?
I'm not sure. If you bring up the form table, I mean, in terms of goals scored and conceded, it's very similar, isn't it, over those last 5 games? We've just conceded 1 more and scored exactly the same amount of goals in the last 5 games. And that's the point I was trying to make. If you look at the home form and the away form for Villa and Spurs, it's 2 sides that enjoy playing where they're going to be playing, basically. And I don't know. I think I do fancy our chances, because I said it in midweek, you know, I fancy our chances against anyone at home. Just these few little injury niggles that do concern me a bit without Van de Ven, us playing that high line. They've got the pace to get in behind us. And their new dynamic in midfield with Tielemans playing the way he is, Morgan Rogers and Amadou Onana. The way they're all 3 of them are playing. I think all 3 of them are having such top seasons so far. It's going to be a really interesting midfield battle.
Definitely. It depends kind of how we're going to set up. I think Ange might be tempted to bring Sarr back in and just add some legs to make sure that Onana's not dominating, make sure Rogers isn't getting too much freedom in the final third. But I would make the case that if we put Decky and Maddison there, they'll have more to deal with than we will, and I think we'll get more advantages out of it than we will. It's obviously a balance, it's a risk versus reward. Obviously against West Ham, you know, we had Maddison and Decky there, and he did change it at half time, and ended up obviously that benefited them. Obviously, you know, they did have Kudus, Bowen, all running us ragged on the wings. It's a different kind of dynamic, I feel, with Villa, because their actually big advantages are not on the wings, they're in the centre. So how do we combat that? I feel like when the advantages like West Ham have on the wings, you kind of need good centre mids to be tracking back and making sure that you're covering the ground. Whereas because we're a very narrow side, if your advantages are more in the centre, if we have Decky and Maddison there who have less ground to cover because they're not always running out wide all the time, I think that's actually a bit easier to manage for them defensively than it would be like against West Ham, who like to stretch the pitch and use people like Kudus and Bowen where the pitch is quite wide. So if we're covering those spaces, you need more legs like Sarr and or you know, Bentancur next to a Basuma, I feel, in those kind of games. I feel like in this game, it's actually we might be better off having a Maddison and a Decky together, just because I think there'll be less ground for them to cover because their bigger threats are more central than out wide. And I think as well, because Onana's such a beast, I kind of feel like you need another one in there just to make sure that we're asking him enough questions. Because I feel like if it's only one of Maddison or Decky, I feel like Onana can just gobble that up. If it's two of them, it gives them more things to think about.
I do feel like we will go with Maddison and Kulu, because Ange would have looked at that game at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium last year and see how, it was at that moment in time last year, I think it was Lo Celso and Decky that played in the middle. And obviously we ran rings around them for those opening half an hour with Bentancur in the 6. And I think Ange will look at that and see it as a key way where we can hurt them down the middle. However, their midfield has changed dynamic from last season to this year. They've very much changed Douglas Luiz for Onana, and Douglas Luiz was a very good player for them last year, but I think Onana is just a different animal in terms of he's got so much. He's so physical. He's a threat as well from set pieces massively. How many goals he got this season? He's got like 3 goals already this season.
Yeah, I think one in the Champions League and 2 in the league.
I think he's a player that I wanted at Spurs last season. I think we had a few conversations about it, and he did end up going to Aston Villa for big money, and I think it's been a really good signing for them.
Yeah, he started very well. Obviously, Luiz was a big player for them last season. He got like 11 goals or something. So
they're different players.
Yeah, Luiz, albeit Luiz is like decent, pretty good off the ball, but his obviously big advantage was on the ball. He's a bit of a dictator. He had great ability, passing ability, and great shooting ability as well. Great technique. Onana's not as good on the ball, but off the ball, he just provides something different. I think Tielemans has really stepped it up as well. So I think Tielemans kind of provides what Luiz did on the ball, and then Onana just takes their game up a level off the ball as well, in terms of his ability to cover ground and things like that. So he makes it a lot more difficult to get through that midfield, I feel like, than it would have been then with Luiz there in the centre. So it's going to be an interesting dynamic. Obviously, we got Decky there. Decky did play central, as you say, last year. So that was one of his only games where he started in that position and did really, really well. But he obviously was partnered with Lo Celso. So it's going to be really interesting. I think the game could be won and lost in that area, really. And look, if it's not going well, you could always bring on those legs of Sarr if we need to. But I feel like if we can blow them away early doors, we're better off trying that with Maddison and Decky than with Sarr.
And that was the plan, wasn't it, last year? We just couldn't put the ball in the back of the net, and then Bentancur got injured, and then our rhythm got stopped, and then
also they scored right on the striker. It was 1-0 right on the striker half time. They get a goal, and then
Watkins scored halfway through second half.
Yeah.
But we did. If you bring up the phone graphic, this is the lineups and the teams last season at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. They won't play that formation. They won't play a 4-4-2 coming into it this year.
It's interesting because Rodgers is kind of like a shadow striker, so it's quite a similar form. It's not that different to how they play. But on the wings, who do they have on the wings there? They got
Cash and McGinn.
Yeah, so it won't be that. It'll probably be. It might be McGinn. It could. I think on the right it's going to be McGinn or Bailey, and on the left it's probably going to be Jacob Ramsey. I reckon
the left will definitely be Jacob Ramsey.
So it's a very different kind of midfield and different dynamic. So they play very narrow. They kind of, especially with Ramsey and McGinn, off the ball, they do very much double up on the winger and they very much help out. But on the ball, they're very, very narrow. They don't really have too much width. And unless Bailey's there, he offers a bit of width on the right-hand side. But if it's McGinn and Ramsey, it's very concentrated in the centre. So with the fact that in that instance, it might help us a bit that Udogie and Porro can be inverted, because if they come inside and then they're helping out Basuma in those areas, I actually don't think the wide areas are going to be too much of a problem for us to deal with. If I remember rightly, when they did hurt us in the wide areas at the Tottenham stadium, which they did, I remember Digne had a few moments on the wide area, but there was a fullback. So I think our wingers are going to have a big job just to make sure their fullbacks are not providing the width, because that's where their width comes from generally when they play that formation. So I think Sonny and Johnson are going to have to muck in and make sure they're the ones not allowing them to get width. But I actually think Porro and Udogie inviting might help us in this game to deal with the likes of Ramsey and McGinn tucking inside.
I think both games last year we were like obviously heavily dominant in possession, weren't we? Especially the one at the Villa Park. You know, we completely dominated them for large parts of the game. You're seeing in a couple of games at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium now, particularly the Man City game where Man City had a lot of possession. You're looking at the Brentford game where we conceded a bit of possession to them and we made it a bit more of a transitional game. How do you see this one in that aspect going?
Well, seeing how Villa have played a lot of their games this season, especially away from home, they don't tend to dominate possession. They tend to, they tend to give a bit of possession to the opposition team, not like loads, but they've from what I've seen so far in their away games, they got 48%, 43%, 48% possession. In those are the games they've won. Actually, the game that they drew, they had 56% possession. So maybe there is a case that if we should give up a bit of possession so we can hit them when we do win the ball back. And obviously, we're a very aggressive team out winning the ball back half the pitch, and we did that a lot at the Tottenham Stadium last season, which was why we got a few chances. I was looking at some of the stats for Aston Villa over the season, so far this season, and in terms of tackles in the attacking third, they're actually like near the bottom of the. They're like kind of like lower mid-table for those, whereas obviously we're top of the league. For tackles in the middle third, they're a bit higher, about 8th, and we're like 4th. So it's going to be a big battle when it comes to control for possession in the middle, because that's where Aston Villa try and kind of do their pressing triggers in that mid-block. They try and win the ball back in that central area. And with Onana, they're very good at doing that. So I guess there's two ways you can look at it. Either do we put in a Sarr there so we're winning the ball back off them, because with Tielemans and Onana, they're good, but are they the best on the ball? Can they be caught potentially? Are they the quickest on the ball? Maybe not. Or do you go for someone like Maddison and with Decky together, so that when Villa are trying to win the ball back off us in that middle, they're actually not finding it as easy to do that, because we've got really good technicians and we can play through them. So it's a bit of give and take there. It's a very interesting dilemma that Ange has. I think there are two good options there. Either one, you could get advantages out of them, but with Maddison well rested, hopefully, because I feel like when Maddison plays midweek and then he plays again on the Sunday, which has happened a couple of times, maybe his intensity drops off a bit. And when Maddison isn't going at 100%, because he's not the most defensive player and he's not the strongest player, then he can be quite easily bypassed. But when he's going at 100%, he can be quite an effective presser, which we saw against Brentford. So I think with him well rested, I think he's just going to side with him.
I agree with that. And you look at Amadou Onana, right? Obviously, he's had a brilliant season, great start to life at Aston Villa this season. But you have seen traits of Onana, maybe last year at Everton, where he can get overawed a little bit in midfield if you really put it on him quite seriously. And if you have a Maddison and a Kulusevski with the way they link up together, I think there is a situation to say that with how good they are on the ball, we can outnumber him specifically in midfield and spring on him and get a lot of attacks. And especially when you're looking at the physical matchup between Decky and Onana, that is going to be one hell of a physical battle, isn't it?
Definitely.
Between them two. So I think when you're looking at the form table, the situation I was talking about, our home form, their away form, I think when you're looking at it, I think we should back our home form a lot more than maybe they should back their away. What I'm trying to say is our home form is better than their away form in terms of the way we're playing. I get the sense that we can beat anyone at our pitch, and I know they've won the last two games at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, but they should come into it a little bit more fearful than we should be coming into it, and we should really back ourselves and fancy our chances and really take the game to them with the attacking players that we do have, because they are top quality. With the fans behind us at our stadium, the way we're playing our football at the moment, particularly at that ground, I mean, yes, I'm coming into it worried because of a few defensive issues that we have, but there's no reason why there's no excuses why we shouldn't win this game. There really isn't.
I think it could be a very similar story to last year, and to be fair, a very similar story to a lot of our games this season, where we blow teams away, but it could be a lot could depend on whether we take the chances that we make or not. And I do feel like we will have an early flurry of chances like we tend to do at home. And if we don't take advantage of them, then I think, again, come the end of the first half / beginning of the second half, we do tend to have a bit of a drop-off. That's where Villa can come back into the game. And if we're not winning by that stage, all of a sudden you could see Villa find they were back in the game and take a foothold in the game. So I do think I could see that happening again on Sunday, because I think Unai Emery is going to try and contain us. I think that's what he usually tries to do away from home. He obviously has his own way of going forward, and he's not coming. I don't think he's coming here for a draw. He's going to try and win the game, but I think he's got a certain way of playing, which is quite an aggressive mid-block, but also don't go. He's a bit standoffish as well. Allows you to have a bit of the ball essentially in certain areas, kind of in your own defensive third, coming into the middle of the pitch. And, you know, you saw that when teams do that sometimes, we can overwhelm them if they give us a bit too much time on the ball and allow us to play too much. They have to disrupt our rhythm. They're going to try and do that, but I also feel like sometimes away from home they allow you a bit too much of the ascendancy, and maybe that could be their undoing.
Well, let's hope so, my friend. It's going to be a big occasion. If we win this game, it's 2 very good wins in the space of a week, going into the big game against Galatasaray midweek and then Ipswich just before the international break. It's a really big opportunity to finish off this period before the international break really strongly, going into the massively busy period, which will be, December.
Yeah, I think going into this game, the only worries are what you said. Like, obviously, Van Ven's out, which is a blow, but also Romero, is he going to be fully fit going into this game? Solanke, is he going to be fully fit going into this game? Doggy, he's played so much. Is he going to be fully fit? As you say, Villa rested a lot of their players, and we put a big effort in on Wednesday. So that dynamic worries me a bit, because I know if Tottenham aren't really on it with their pressing, they can be got at. Obviously, we are very open and we can be played through. So that's a bit of a concern.
If he's not 100%, I'd play Ben Davis. I think Ben Davis has stepped in, done really well, obviously against not as good opposition as what we're going to face this weekend, but he did pretty well against City in midweek. So if Romero's not 100%, I would actually back Ben Davis to come in and do a job.
But it's not just him. There's Solanke, I say, Doggy. It's a few of them. Decky can run all day, but he also played 90 minutes on midweek. So I'm just a bit worried that sometimes when our pressing intensity isn't quite there, we get caught out too much. So on that front, if we do have these concerns, I probably would put in a SAR. But if we're confident that we can keep up that intensity that we know we're capable of, I would put Maddison in. So it's a juggling act for Ange Postecoglou to figure out on Sunday.
I mean, that Aston Villa game was just after that Chelsea game, wasn't it?
It was the first game after the Chelsea game.
Was it? Second game, I think it was, after the Chelsea game. And everyone was fearing the worst, weren't we? Because we were like, what are we going to do? No Romero, no Van der Ven, no Maddison. And we surprised a lot of people with how we played that day. And I think probably from the neutral perspective, I think a lot of fans are probably expecting Villa to come to Tottenham and win. So I think we can surprise a lot of neutrals as well this weekend. And if we win, I think it's a little bit of a statement if we win this weekend.
Well, if we win well, it will be. And I think obviously Villa 5 points ahead of us at the moment. We can't let that go to 8. We need to cut that gap. We can't let that gap keep growing, and we need to put a dent in what they're doing at the moment. So I think it's a very important game for Spurs on Sunday, and especially that good feeling we got against Man City. We want to keep that. We don't want to lose momentum, because after that defeat against Palace, that was absolutely terrible performance and terrible defeat. But we did respond well. We did get the win. And look, at the end of the day, we are 8 wins out of 10. So we want to keep that momentum going. We don't want Villa to dent our confidence again and have another step backwards. So I think for momentum's sake and for Ange building something here, I think Sunday, if we can get that win, that'll be massive.
Score prediction?
3-1 Spurs, I said.
3-1. I'm going to 3-0 up early and they'll get a goal back.
I'm a bit worried with some of the niggling things we got in going into the game, but I'm just going to assume that everyone's, if they're playing, they're going to be 100% fit. I'm just going to assume that. And if that's true, I do think we can overwhelm them a bit. I do think I know they got Watkins, but with Son, Johnson, has been in good goal scoring form. Son back in the team. We saw what he did against West Ham. Solanke's doing some brilliant hold up play as well. With Decky in the form he's in, with a refreshed Maddison, I'm just going to back us to have a bit more goal scoring threat than what they will. And as much as they got threats, Rodgers has been having a brilliant season. I'm worried about him. Watkins is always a threat. I'm just looking. Apart from those two, like I'm just not that worried too much about going going forward.
Tielemans as well.
Yeah, I know, but he doesn't score many. I know he's great on the ball, but if we can just stop him from playing, like it's harder to stop a Decky from playing than a Tielemans is my point. So I think it's going to be harder for them to stop us and for us to stop them. I feel.
But also they probably have better tools to stop us than we have tools to stop them.
Potentially, they probably do, but I'd rather the better tools. The harder.
That's what makes this matchup so interesting. The tactical battles, their away form, our home form, their tools defensively, our tools offensively. I mean, there's so many cases that you can make for both clubs in this game. Definitely. That's what makes it so interesting.
But I just think going into it, yes, they do have good defensive tools, but at the end of the day, they have also conceded more goals than us this season. And going off that, I'm just going to go for Tottenham to win 3-1.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a very, very tight game. I think it's going to be such an interesting tactical battle. Both teams that will definitely fancy their chances. Villa, obviously 5 points ahead of us at the moment, so we just cannot afford to let them go 8 points ahead of us at this stage of the season. We have to beat them, and I'm going to bank on that, and I'm going to go for a 2-1 win to Spurs. I think it'll be tight. I think we might go 2-0 up maybe early or the early stage of the second half, and I think Villa will come back into it and it'll be a nervy end to the game, but I'm backing Spurs just to hold on to that 2-1 lead. So let me know your score predictions in the comment section below. That is our match preview for the big game this weekend. In the studio, I believe it's Barnaby and Ashmatic on the watch along. Me and Sim will be in the stadium for you guys. I'm very much looking forward to getting back into that stadium and hopefully cheering on another 3 points for Tottenham Hotspur. We've got a members chat here from Mr. Brian Daigle, member for 48 months. He says, big up my brothers and everyone in the chat. Have a great weekend and hopefully 3 points coming our way. Almost at my half century. Come on, you Spurs.
Jeez,
nearly 50 months, geezer.
Getting close.
And Eugene S says, big up, lads. I thought you were just my bingo buddies, but turns out you have a channel as well. Great content. Keep it up. Big up to you, Eugene.
Big up to you, Eugene.
Thanks for coming on today.
Madison has just shared a video on Instagram, it looks like. Apparently on Wednesday, they were in such bad traffic that him and Mikey Moore decided to walk down the Tottenham High Road, the last mile, because they were in such bad traffic.
Bloody hell. That was the traffic that we were in.
Yeah. And,
it took us probably 2.5 hours to go 5 miles.
And no one, he had his hood up, so no one recognised them.
That's mad that nobody recognised them.
Yeah, they were walking down the high road. He said all the pubs were there and people were full. No one saw them.
That's mad.
He took a video of him then walking down the high road.
How did no one recognise them? That's crazy. I'm sure we would have recognised them.
100%.
So you're going past Chick King and everything.
No wonder Madison didn't play. He was knackered after that walk down the high road. That's what who was it? The Carabao managers said. Oh, that walk is what cost us the defeat.
Yeah, well, it's what got us the win.